Okay, so just to show you how we're going to be doing this, this of course is the hand rod wrapper that we've been using throughout this video series. We're just going to put this construction thread, or construction twine rather, right on the same bobbin that the normal thread would be on. And then we're going to take it and we're actually going to run this twine right through the same thread tensioner that we would use if this were actual thread. The nice thing about this thread tensioner is it sandwiches the thread through these smooth plates so that it'll provide you some steady tension for wrapping that thread on your rod. So we're going to pull it through this thread tensioner. We're going to hook it into our little eye here so that we can change the angle as we want. And typically when you're wrapping, the thread gets pulled up and over the rod, just like that. So let's go ahead and get started with just a basic thread wrap. Alright, so to start off with your first wrap, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this thread around the rod blank one complete turn. There we go. One complete 360. Alright, and we're holding it in place. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to actually take the thread and we're going to pull it over the ladder turn. And then we're just going to let it go. So this is where the thread crosses over, right at top dead center. I'll move my finger so you can see that. You can see the thread crossing right there. Now we're going to pinch down on where that thread crosses, and we're going to rotate the rod blank. Okay, so as you can see, we've gone over where the thread is wrapped. I'm going to pack it back into place here. So the wraps are all right next to each other. And then we're going to continue wrapping and put yet another locking wrap into place. Now we have two pieces of thread that are locking the original piece of the original thread as it went around. We're going to do another locking wrap. I'm just going to rotate around again. At this point you really don't have to pinch anymore because that tension is keeping that thread in place. We're going to pack this thread together. We're just going to use our fingernail to do that, or we could use a thread burnishing tool such as this to pack the threads in nicely. Now I like to go ahead and do a fourth locking wrap. And then we can snip off this tag end. Now the reason why this thread is laying down previous to the next thread is really this angle. And I apologize if you can't see it too well, but in order to really illustrate that, the thread is coming back. In other words, it's leaning towards the direction of travel as we're wrapping here. And what that allows it to do is it almost tries to roll up on the previous thread, but the angle isn't severe enough that it's allowed to do that. So the thread ends up falling off the previous wrap and slapping down and hitting that rod blank. So at this point, our thread is securely latched into place. We're just going to go ahead and snip this off as close to the other threads as possible. And we've accomplished that. And now we're just going to continue wrapping. If your threads start to come apart because this angle has changed or something, just go ahead and pack the threads back together. If for any reason the angle is too great and you end up wrapping thread up above on top of the previous wraps, then go ahead and just kind of pinch back up a little bit, put the thread where it's supposed to go, provide some tension with your fingers until you take up all the slack that you just created by rolling it backwards. And once the tension is back on this piece again, you can let go and continue your wrapping. You may have to just adjust this angle. It's just a matter of getting used to it. But just beware that that angle is really critical for getting the thread to lay down exactly next to the previous thread in the wrap. So as you continue around, the wraps are starting to look pretty good here. pack them back together from time to time. You want nice tight wraps. It's important that you have really good lighting when you're doing this, and it's important that you have a view so that you can actually see, as I'm eyeballing this, I see the horizon of this thread right here. And I'm watching that, and I can tell very quickly if the thread begins to wrap up over the previous thread. We don't want that. We all want them to be laying on the blank in exactly the right place. The nice thing about a hand rod wrapper is not only can you adjust your angle of thread with this movable piece, but you can also kind of move back and forth on the wrapper itself very easily. Some people prefer to manage their angle in that fashion and pretty much just leave this guide where it lays. So as you can see, we've got a good wrap started here. Periodically as we go around, we're packing this thread again. Now if this was an actual fly rod, you'd probably be using a thread burnisher or something. Thread burnisher is good for packing the thread, and it's also good for smoothing out the thread before you apply epoxy as well. So let me just quickly show you how to end a wrap. What we're going to do is, about 4 or 5 turns from the end of the wrap, and you'll just have to estimate this. We want to put a locking loop into the thread. So I'm going to turn this about 5 more times, but I'm going to put this locking loop in now. Now, first, I like my thread entry and exit points to be in the same place. Now, this is where I started my loop. I can see this thread kind of going underneath. So I'm going to put my locking loop, just about an 8-inch piece of thread here. I'm going to put it in the same place, and I'm going to continue wrapping. Let's pack that back into place, and I'm going to continue the wrapping process. There's 1 turn, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're ready to finish this wrap off. Let's pack this back together a little bit here. Okay, so I'm going to apply some tension right here with some pressure with my finger. I'm just going to push this down. I'm going to back off a little bit. I'm going to create a little bit of slack down here in this. You don't want to cut a thread that's under a great amount of tension, or else you'll just end up with a frayed mess. I'm going to snip off this twine here, giving myself a good 6-8 inches to work with. And now I'm just going to run it through this loop. Now that I've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to pull this thread under the previous 4 or 5 wraps. Now don't just grab a hold of this and rip, because you don't know what's happening underneath your finger if that's obscuring your view. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some tension here. I'm going to provide that down tension that used to be provided by my thread tensioner. I'm going to get that finger out of the way. Okay? So I've got some tension here, and now I'm going to very slowly start pulling that thread through. And I'm going to go back and forth and coax this to come through exactly where I want it to. There we go. It's through. I need to pull down this way just a little bit. All right. Our thread wrap now just needs to be packed again. It's nice and tight because we had a good amount of tension on it with the thread tensioner. That is how you start and stop your thread wraps. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this wooden wedge, we're going to put it on here and really kind of show you some techniques for getting that thread to ramp up over the guide foot. And some things that, maybe some handy techniques for dealing with maybe little gaps that might be created as that thread begins its travel up on the guide foot.